I think we could actually get started now. Again, for those of you who just came in, my name is Carol McNamara, and I am the Associate Director for Public Programs for the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership. And we're just really grateful that you're able to join us for what I think is a really important discussion. I'm going to introduce my colleague, Dr. Teresa Smart, who's going to talk to you a little bit about what the SCETL Advantage is, and then also introduce to you Meg Richardson. Teresa Smart Professor Smart is a faculty member in the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership, and she teaches a lot of sections of CEL 100. So I'm sure some of you have had her, have been lucky enough to have her as a professor. And in the spring, she's also teaching a class on medieval political thought. So I hope you'll think about considering enrolling in her class. Not to mention my class, by the way, Justice and Virtue. Sorry, I can't help it. So please let me turn over the floor, the proverbial floor, the virtual floor, to Dr. Smart.
Thank you, Dr. McNamara. We are thrilled to have Meg here, but I do want to set the stage briefly by reflecting on the idea of the SCETL Advantage. And I want to think about this by thinking about one of the mottos that you've probably seen online, which says that our goal is to inspire a new class of leaders. Now, the school has been designed to cultivate leadership in a one-of-a-kind way. But as its students, it's perfectly reasonable for you to ask, how is that? You know, what is the advantage that I'm receiving by pursuing an education here? So in general, we think that this major brings together three components that are very important for civic leadership today. Number one is a classical liberal education that gives you a breadth and depth of perspective on humans in general, but also communities and how they work. Two is formation in the American political tradition in particular. You know, we live in a specific time and place, and we need to learn the details of our own circumstances. And number three is hands-on experiential leadership preparation through components like our internships, study abroad programs, public programs, individualized mentoring by professors, which is pretty unique at a place like ASU. We think that these three pillars are like three legs of a stool, and they come together to give you the SCETL Advantage, a strong foundation for leadership. But you yourselves, as you prepare for the future, also have to be able to communicate that advantage to others, parents, friends, future employers, professional connections. You have to be able to leverage the SCETL Advantage and make it effective. So this series of workshops that we call the SCETL Advantage series is a career readiness series that helps you reflect on your own education, and it gives you a kind of conceptual and practical toolkit for leveraging it out in the world. So that's our goal, and we're very honored to have special guest Meg Richardson here to help us focus on one pillar in particular, which is that liberal education component. That's what she's going to speak about. So I will now address Meg, who lives in Washington, D.C., where she is the chief of staff to the president of DevX, a media platform for the global development community. But Meg herself is a product of liberal education, having received an undergraduate degree in political science from a very small school called Smith College. Now, her own international experiences, as I understand it, both in her family and in college, helped set her on this trajectory towards a career in global development. So we're excited to have her, and I won't say much more because I know she's going to share her own story with you. So welcome, Meg.
Thanks so much for having me. And I'm really thrilled to be here. I did receive a liberal arts degree from a small college in Massachusetts, but I am also the daughter of two teachers. So when it comes to liberal arts, I am completely and totally biased, and you should treat me that way. So just to run through how this will work, I'm going to go through my presentation. I'm going to try to keep it short so we can get to questions, because I really would love to hear from you, and I would love to hear about, you know, what concerns you have, what's on your mind as we talk through these things. If you do want to interrupt in the middle of this, or you have a question on a specific thing I'm saying, feel free to jump in. I know that can be intimidating, but please definitely feel like you can do that. And we'll get going from there. So what's the problem that we're actually here to talk about? I chose this title, How Not to Get Automated Out of Your Job in 2030, because when I was thinking about this presentation, which some of you might know I was supposed to give this last year before COVID, I was thinking a lot about automation and disruption in the different industries. Obviously, you know, we're all virtual here for a reason now, so I'll talk a little bit about that too. But the problem I said that we were here to solve is how not to get automated out of your job in 2030. So before we get going, what's the deal with automation? Well, it turns out that it's a buzzword that a lot of people throw around to make folks a little bit nervous about job prospects, but it's not something that I would worry too much about. 85 million jobs have been, or there's predicted that 85 million jobs will be automated by 2025. The World Economic Forum has stated that that's the data that they've pulled, but about 97 million jobs will be created by the same technology. So even though the workforce in 2025 will likely be 50% automated, 50% humans, it's not actually something that I would worry too much about. What I actually want to talk about is disruption and what that is doing to industries. So if you read the description of this talk, you'll see that I listed Uber, Airbnb, Venmo, these platforms that you guys are all very well familiar with, that have disrupted the industries that they're a part of. So think about Uber, right? Disrupting the taxi industry, Airbnb disrupted the hotel industry. All industries are being disrupted all the time, but with technology and in the sort of space that we're in right now, disruption's happening at an exponentially fast rate, and it will only increase. So why is this important? What's the actual problem that we're here to solve? We're here to help each other understand why a liberal arts education will help you navigate a world that's being massively disrupted by automation, by disruption, and most recently by a global pandemic, a uncertain US presidency, a world where populism is on the rise, and as a result, different funding mechanisms have changed. I mean, the world is just changing rapidly. So how do we use our education to make us marketable and to you know, find good jobs once you graduate? And as you know, who am I? I'm Meg Richardson, Chief of Staff at DevX and liberal arts, product of a liberal arts education. Before we get into anything, I want to do a really quick exercise with everybody. And this includes professors and staff. So everybody, if you could pull up your notes on your phone or on your computer, or grab a pen and paper. And I want you to write down the first job that you remember ever wanting to have. I was about 5 to 7 years old when I started thinking about this. Here's a picture of me for you to look at. So when you were this age, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up? Next, I want you to think about high school. When you were about 17, what did you think you wanted to be? I wasn't totally sure, but I had some ideas. So if you weren't totally sure, just write down what your ideas were. This is me in high school, not using AirPods yet, obviously. And then right now, what are you doing? So professors, what's your current title? Anybody who has a job, what's your current title? And for folks who are obviously still in college and here, what are you thinking about? You know, like just what kind of jobs are on your mind right now as things that you think that you're interested in? So look at what you've written down and raise your hands if the jobs that you thought you had when you were 5 years old are different from what is on your mind right now. Great. So a number of you. I won't ask everybody to share theirs, but here are mine. When I was 5 years old, that's when I learned about Neil Armstrong. And I asked my mom if a woman was with him when he walked on the moon. She said no. So I thought it'd be pretty cool to be the first female astronaut to get up onto the moon. And then a few years later, I was caught arguing with my mom, and someone said I should be a lawyer. I didn't know what a lawyer was, but my mom told me about this woman, Hillary Clinton. She thought that maybe she'd run for president one day, and I thought that sounded like a cool job. So obviously at age 22, I got a job, and I am not an astronaut, nor am I close to being president. So what's the point of all of this? Well, the point is we're human, right? And we evolve, and what we want and what we think and what we thought we wanted changes. And the same is true for the workforce. So, what does that mean? Well, it means that you need to have the skills that help you navigate an ever evolving self and an ever evolving workforce. What you think you want right now, I can guarantee is going to be at least a little bit different from where you'll be in 10 years. And that doesn't mean, you're necessarily different, but it does mean that you need to understand what you need to be able to say, oh yeah, I think that job sounds good, even though I don't know what it is. Because a lot of the jobs that result from disruption or from big pandemics like this change. They haven't been invented yet. Most of your professors, when they started thinking about this school year in January, were not planning to be content creators, and yet here they are recording classes, getting ring lights for their computers. Things change rapidly, so you just need to know what to do. So we evolve as humans. And before I talked about myself a little bit, I do want to give you some data to ground yourself in, because as Dr. Smart said, sometimes we have to talk to our parents and convince them that a liberal arts education is a good one. So the World Economic Forum, which is an organization that brings together some of the brightest minds in the world, did a conference a couple weeks ago, actually, and they determined that these are the top 10 skills that you'll need in the next 5 years. I realize it's a little bit fuzzy, but hopefully you can see: critical thinking, complex problem solving, leadership, social influence, resilience to stress and tolerance. I'm sure you can guess why that is on there. These are really, these are skills that a lot of people call soft skills. I don't like that term. I don't think they're soft. It implies that these skills aren't hard. They are, but they're skills that are not, sort of hardwired into, they're not math problems, and they're not sort of skills that you can learn fairly easily. So how do you learn these skills, right? Well, you learn them by studying ideas, by studying history, by studying what people have said in literature. You learn them through the arts. You learn them through studying how people think. And, when you're thinking about complex problem solving, part of complex problem solving is understanding, what the problem is and who are the people involved, what their motivations are, where they come from. And so I went through this list the WEF did, and I determined that 9 out of 10 of these skills you can learn through studying ideas, by studying politics, by studying history. The only one that you can't learn is technology design. But I would venture to say that if you know how to learn something, which also a liberal arts degree helps you do, then you can pretty much learn anything, including design. So the studying of ideas actually works. And how do I know that? Well, there's some evidence, right? This is a list of folks that have liberal arts degrees that I think we can, objectively agree have been fairly successful in their lives. This is a totally random list, and it's mostly based on me and my own research and my own interest. But you can see there's a number of super successful people on here who have had to deal with many changes in their industries and complex situations, who have liberal arts degrees. The other reason I know is because I'm proof. And the situations that I've dealt with in my career I can trace every single one back to my degree and the things that I've learned. So I'll tell you a couple stories, and then I will close this thing out and we can get to questions. So when I was in college, I joined Senator Angus King's campaign. He was the former governor at that point, not currently a senator. And he is an independent senator from Maine. And the reason I wanted to join his campaign was because I thought being an independent senator was pretty cool. One of the reasons is because, you know, you get to talk to Democrats and Republicans, but the other reason is I'd never thought about a campaign before. I thought politics was really interesting, but I'd never really done a campaign. So I joined the campaign, and about 5 days in, we were at an event with the senator, and we were in my town, and there were about 80 people there. 5 minutes till the event begins, and I was standing with the campaign staff, and they said, "Who's going to introduce the senator?" He's sort of looking around at everyone. He looks at me and he says, "Well, you're from here, aren't you? Why don't you introduce me?" Again, I'm 5 days into a campaign. I think I was like 20 years old. And I will be honest, I knew a lot about Angus King from his governor days, but I didn't really know his policy platform. I hadn't done all the research that I should have done. And I was totally scared out of my mind. And I said, you know, maybe not. Like, why doesn't someone else do it? He said, no, you should do this. These are your people. You do it. And he was smart, right? Because Angus King knew that Maine ultimately is a big, small town. There's 1 million people in Maine. Everybody knows everybody else. And he knew that, you know, being from there, I'd probably have a bigger impact. So I spent the next 5 minutes totally freaking out. And as I tried to calm myself down, I was like, what do I do? Right? Like, how do I actually say something and get through this moment? Well, I knew from the papers that I had written and the history that I'd studied that one of the most effective ways to communicate with people was just to understand where they came from and why they were there and what their motivations were. So I thought about, you know, how to make a good argument. And I put together some thoughts in my head. Thankfully, did not embarrass myself. And we all went on with our lives. And it was a successful event. Angus King is on his second term as senator. And it's not just because of that introduction, but I'll take a small piece of that success. But I truly had to lean on my ability to create an argument and to understand why people were there. So that was one story. And then, you know, when I was faced with graduation, I had 2 jobs that I was that I could take, right? One was doing some admissions work actually at a school. As I said, I was daughter of 2 academics. I did a lot of work for the admissions of my college, and I thought that that would be a pretty easy thing that I could do, and I would be pretty good at it. I also knew people in the city that I was going to that job was in, so that was one avenue. The other avenue was taking a 3-month paid internship down in Washington, D.C., a city that I'd always dreamed about going to. As I said, you know, I thought I was going to be the first female president. So I'd always thought about going to D.C., but I didn't know anybody. It was a huge risk, and I had no idea if I'd be able to get a job after 3 months. So I talked to my mom, and I talked to my professors and my advisors, and they said, obviously, you should go down to DC. If you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. And I was scared out of my mind. But again, you know, I knew that I had these professors that I could call in 3 months. I knew that I would learn something. And frankly, I really wanted to try to start experiencing different industries. So I spent 3 months in DC interning on the Hill, and it was a great experience. But what I learned in those 3 months was that there were so many industries that interact with politics. It's not just politics, right? There's business, there's NGOs, there are all types of media functions that you need to learn about. I basically spent the whole summer realizing that I didn't know anything and I needed to know a lot more. And so the area that I decided that I really wanted to pinpoint was business, because again, I had this liberal arts degree. I didn't study business. I didn't know anything about finance. I really wanted to find a job that could help teach me that. So I found an assistant job at DevX, which is a media company. So it's a private company. It means it's totally for profit. But it also was a place where I could learn about everybody working in international development, which is another place, another industry that I thought was really interesting. That's, you know, sort of NGOs, the UN, Save the Children. So it kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone. If I could get this job, then I would learn all the things that I wanted to learn. But again, I had never worked in business. I had only ever done internships for politicians and nonprofits. So I really had to make the case to my boss that I could be a great assistant because I knew how to do research really well. I knew how to think through different angles of different arguments. As anybody who's an assistant or who has seen The Devil Wears Prada knows, that any good assistant works as a gatekeeper. So I also had to make the case that I would be able to say no to people and to understand who to say no to and how to be diplomatic. And honestly, most of the reason that I know how to do that is because of the work that I did in college, thinking through, different angles for different papers. And I had to sort of explain all of that to him. I had to write a position paper on something I totally didn't disagreed with, which did that. It continues to help me write talking points for issues that I don't really know that much about. And frankly, I'm not super interested in. So I had to make this case to him. I successfully made it and I started as his assistant. And sure enough, I used all of those skills to be a gatekeeper and to try to help people navigate, how to talk to my boss and how to make their own cases to him. One of the things that I really learned was that most of the things that I was going to be asked to do, I had no idea how to do, but I had a good sort of foundation in problem solving and critical thinking, so that not only could I figure out how to solve the problem, but I would also show up to a meeting with problems down the road already solved or already thought through. But again, about a year and a half in, I realized I don't want to be an assistant forever. I still have so much I want to learn. And this is not the thing that I want to do with the rest of my life. I love my boss. I love the company, but this isn't, the administrative stuff is not what I wanted to do. So again, I called my professors, I called my network. I said, so what do I do next? And something I thought a lot about was grad school. And I can talk a little bit more about that later. But I decided that I wasn't ready. And that's definitely not something that I wanted to do before I was ready. So, I talked to folks about, this idea of being a chief of staff. And the reason I wanted to sort of angle towards a chief of staff role, because when you're a chief of staff, you get to do a lot of different things over a large period of time. So, my job changes probably every 8 months, 12 months. And I do a lot of different things, but I had to pitch once again to my boss that I could be able to add more substance to his life, sort of take off some of the administrative things for him. And one of the things I did as a chief of staff was I said, I think we need to have a people team. And so a people team is kind of like an HR function where it focuses entirely internally on the teams at DevX. We think about, what trainings do our managers need? How do you make sure that people are successful at their jobs? And I made the case to him that there wasn't one, that I thought there should be one, that I had heard from a lot of people about their concerns that there wasn't one, and that I was the right person to run it. And again, because I had leadership skills from college, and because I had the ability to sort of navigate and think through the many different angles of this argument, I successfully made the case to him. More importantly, I looked at the organization and I thought about who I would need to get on board for this promotion, this transition. And I talked to them first and I got them on board. So I was able to go to him and says, a lot of people think that this is a good idea and here's why. And that worked. And so I started our people team. But in addition to that, I've managed a 50% growth at the company. I work on partnerships. I have interviewed heads of states and celebrities. I've trained executives internationally about different strategies for their workforce. I've done a lot of really interesting and cool things. Done a lot of unsexy things too. I've written more sort of talking points that I could, count on one hand. And I certainly have had my share of sort of nightmarish group work that has had to get done, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But the point is, at every single turn, I've been able to rely on my education and really, I hadn't gone to grad school for most of this. So I really had to rely on the fundamentals that I learned, both in how to absorb information, how to think it through, how to make different cases that I learned in college. So I'm happy to expand on any of that, and we can talk through different parts of this, but I know I've been talking for a while. Most importantly, out of all of this, I still don't know what I want to do. And I think it's 100% okay for you to not know what you want to do with your life. I think the most important thing to spend your time right now doing is to learn about the world and learn about how to study ideas and how to understand what people think. Don't focus so much on the type of job that you want. It's really about what do you like doing every day? What kind of skills are you good at? Because when you do end up looking for a job, titles don't mean as much as you think they mean. What you really want to look for is what they're saying in the job descriptions and what you've learned that you're good at, because that will help you, really use what you've learned with this degree and apply it to the workforce. So I also put risks on this slide because when I was going through this presentation with my mom, which I still do, she said that I should say it's important to take risks. And I do think that that's true. Without the encouragement of people in my network and my professors primarily, I wouldn't have taken the risk to move to DC, and it wouldn't put me on this trajectory that I was on. And I think that that's something that a liberal arts education ultimately made me feel like I could do. I knew that if I crashed and burned and didn't get a job after 3 months, that I could get a job as a waitress and figure out what to do next, because I have people skills and I understand, all of the different things that you need to have when you're working one job so that you can find your next job. So I promise this works. I'm going to stop talking right now, and I'd love to move to questions.
Thank you so much, Meg. So at this point, I invite our students to volunteer with your questions. A few things: we would love to see your beautiful faces. So if you do have a webcam and can turn it on, please do that. And then second, I ask that you use the raise hand function if you have a comment, since I can really only see a few people at a time. It'll just be easier for me to know if you're raising your hand. So use the raise hand function, which you can see if you click on participants. At the bottom, there will be a little button. So questions welcome. Jacob.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm a sophomore, and I know a lot of other people here are either freshmen or sophomores, and we still have a lot of time to add another minor or a major to our SCETL education. So through your experience, have you picked up on anything that would be helpful for us to study?
It's a good question. I think when you're thinking about your minor, you really should be thinking about what you are most interested in, or what makes you feel really confused, what makes you feel maybe kind of mad, what gets your emotions going when you read through the descriptions, because minors are the kind of thing that you can turn to as a passion project. So the reason I say this, I minored in Middle Eastern Studies, and I minored in Middle Eastern Studies is because I was 11 years old when 9/11 happened. And I remember being really confused. I remember looking at the TV and asking my parents to explain what the heck was going on, and just nobody having a satisfactory answer. And so it made me mad that nobody could explain it to me. And that's why I pursued it. And as a result, I studied abroad in Jordan. I met some incredible people. I, interviewed the Prince of Jordan at one point because I was still really confused and wanted some answers. So I think when you're thinking about a minor, it's less important to think about what, sort of what minor will set me up to get a job at this place. I think it's more important to think about what can you add on to what you're already doing that you're really interested in. Because if you're really interested in it, when you get to your job interview and they're saying, why did you minor in English literature? Or why did you minor in, the political science? You'll be able to say, well, I was so confused about this thing, or I really wanted to study more of this thing, and here's why. And mostly what that shows is that you're an interesting person and you're super passionate and you have interests outside of just being a good, a good professional, that you're, and those interests will, any employer who's thinking about what they need out of a team member in terms of critical thinking and leadership skills, they see someone who's passionate about something, it'll be an immediate green light for them. And again, those skills that I listed before, those are skills you can't automate. So if you can follow your passion with your minor, I think that's probably the best thing you can do.
Okay, thank you so much. Salem.
Hi, nice to see you again. I guess my question is, I feel like a lot of people in SCETL or who do poli-sci are usually going on to law school or graduate programs. So do you have any like intake on that?
I mean, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I thought, man, the number of times I thought that I was going to have to take the LSAT or the GMAT or GREs during school. I went back and forth all the time thinking about, should I do this? If you know for sure that you want to be a lawyer, meaning you absolutely know that you've maybe interned for lawyers or your parents are lawyers, so you know what the day-to-day of a lawyer looks like, what kind of lawyer you think you want to be, you know how much law school costs, and you are ready to take all of that on, because being a lawyer and fighting for human rights through human rights law or immigration law or whatever type of law you want to go to, if that is what you know right now, take the LSAT, go for it. If you think that you should go to law school because you're a political science major and Barack Obama has his law degree and like a lot of poli-sci majors get their law degree, absolutely do not get your law degree or go to law school after graduation. And the reason is that I think, unless you really know what you want to go to graduate school for, you have a lot of time to explore it. And in fact, many graduate schools now are looking for students who have some work experience, who really know that they want to be there. So I think, unless you really know that you want to go on, and it's true for anybody who's thinking about getting their PhD, if you know that that is your passion, that's your calling in life, go for it and use the time while you're young to do those studies. But if you're still not totally sure, or you feel like you have to do it, I would say take some time and work and explore different industries before you do that, because once you explore those industries and experiencing what that life is really like, I think that'll tell you a lot about whether or not you actually want to do it. So a lot of my friends went and they were paralegals for a while, or they, sort of worked with lawyers in various capacities before they went off to law school, or decided that absolutely not, they would never go to law school because it was not the life that they wanted. So only do it if you're really sure. And if you're not sure, there's literally no harm in taking a year and working somewhere and just spending a little bit more time with that.
More questions welcome, but maybe while we wait, I was struck that at a couple points in your own professional development, you mentioned seeking advice from others. You mentioned reaching out to parents, old professors, mentors. What advice do you have for the students in terms of seeking counsel? Did you find this to be valuable? How do you know who to seek, from whom to seek counsel? And are professors scary people?
Yeah, I think professors can be totally intimidating. They're some of the smartest people in the world. I mean, when I say that, when I talk about the World Economic Forum, there is a whole host of professors that they regularly counsel because they're some of the smartest people in the world. So are professors scary? Absolutely not. Are they intimidating? Hell yeah, because they're super smart, but they're also human. They were also where you were. And they've given me some of the best advice I've ever gotten, because they have, one of their main interests in life is your success, right? Like professors don't have to necessarily be teaching all the time. They could have chosen to do many other things with their lives. They're certainly not in it to get, Jeff Bezos type wealthy, right? Like they're literally there to teach you and make sure that you're successful. So totally intimidating. I get it. But 100%, they're some of the few people in your life that are really focused on your success and helping you figure out what to do next with your life. So that is my answer to that question. The best advice I ever got about asking people's advice was to think of yourself as your own mini business. So I like to think of the people that I reach out to as like my board of directors, right? So I'm the president and CEO of Meg Incorporated, right? Like I want to be successful. I want to make a profit. I want to do really cool and interesting things. And when I'm not sure about what to do, I consult my board of directors. Dr. McNamara is on the board of directors of Meg Incorporated. She's one of the people that I seek counsel from. So are some former people that I worked with. So are my parents and my brother. And I choose who I go to with different problems based on whatever the problem is. So if it's a problem of, sort of thinking through, how to help my boss break into a certain industry, I'm going to call the people on the board of directors that are part of that industry. If it's an EQ, like emotional intelligence conversation, I'm going to call my best friend who's actually a therapist, right? I think that you build relationships with people in all walks of life. And you should think of everybody as somebody who's a potential candidate for your board of directors until they state otherwise. And I can't tell you how many people who I have randomly approached and said, hey, I would love to ask your opinion on this, who have picked up the phone. And actually, I have a friend who's a chief of staff, and when she started the job, she was like, what chief of staff do I really want to emulate? Who has done the coolest thing? And she said, Oprah's pretty cool. I wonder if she is a chief of staff. So she did a bunch of research and she found Oprah's chief of staff, and she reached out to her and said, hey, I'd like to ask your advice. Turns out Oprah's chief of staff is amazing. And they spent an hour and a half on the phone. She introduced her to me, and now she's part of this network of chief of staff that I, can turn to if I need to. So, not only would I think about all of the people in your life as people that you can turn to, but I would also say you can take risks and reach out to people that you don't think you might not be interested in talking to you. 9 times out of 10 people like to give advice. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Craig, go for it.
Hello, thank you for your talk again. On the skills for 2025, there's a lot of focus on technology skills. And I was wondering, what was your advice on how to develop technology skills for someone with a liberal education?
Yeah, so I think there is a focus on the ability to understand technology skills, right? So I think that here's the fundamental truth about technology. It is evolving rapidly, and it will continue to evolve rapidly. So the reason I actually think, if you study computer science in college, you are studying just technology. You're actually studying like a subset of technology. And that's useful in that one area. I think with a liberal arts education, you're learning about the history of technology. You're learning how humans interact with technology. You're learning about why different organizations react to certain types of technology. And I think that that understanding will help you tackle the upcoming problems that we will face with technology. One of them being, the issue of social media right now. I mean, there's ample evidence that we are facing a number of threats to our democracy because of social media. That's the kind of thing that you don't learn by code. You can't sort of code your way out of it, right? You have to understand the humans that are using social media, the motivations of the people who created the social media, how it's being used on the world stage. So I think actually, one of the things that's most useful is just being able to understand how technology has evolved and what are all the different aspects of the ecosystem of technology rather than a set of technology yourself. So, basically, I think that a liberal arts education will teach you everything you need to know to understand how technology evolves over the course of our lifetime. Because there's a lot that, we don't know because it hasn't existed yet. So if you know how to at least learn about how it's existing and how it's evolving, then I think you'll be really set up well for the future.
Thank you. More questions?
I'm that good. I answered everybody's questions just by talking for 30 minutes.
So I have a question. When do you know if you need to go on and do another degree? Like, how did you decide when, okay, you have this liberal education, you've been working in the world a lot. for a while, you've been exploring your options. How did you decide you just mentioned, and I happen to know that you are doing a master's degree. So how did you decide which degree to do, and how, and when was the right time to make that decision?
Sure. So I always knew that I wanted to, well, I always knew that I probably wanted to get my master's. Once you graduate and you're the one person in your friend group that didn't go on to get their master's, you do a lot of self-talking about why you didn't do that. And you convince yourself that, like, maybe I don't need your master's. And it's true. I think there are a lot of really successful people who don't have their master's. I decided to go back and start my master's degree when I realized that there were some skills that I probably could learn on my own that I hadn't learned yet, but that I would benefit from learning in the educational ecosystem. So I'm getting my global business administration degree from the Fletcher School at Tufts University, which is basically a fancy way of saying I'm getting an MBA and a policy degree from a policy school out in Massachusetts. And obviously it's all online right now. I'm doing it part-time because I still wanted to work. And the reason I decided to do that was because we went through some changes in my organization where I realized that I really didn't have the skills that I needed to understand what was actually happening, right? Like my boss could explain to me what was happening and I knew how to navigate our organization through it, but I couldn't actually sit down with the problem and solve it because I didn't have the hard finance skills. Now, I considered going and taking a corporate finance class, on my own. But as I researched it, I realized that it wasn't just that I didn't understand the finance. What I didn't understand was the economics around the financial decisions that we were making. And actually that was part of a bigger issue, which was sort of the international stage that the economics, that the financial situation was happening on. So I had considered my MBA before. I had considered going back and getting a policy degree before. Neither really sounded that interesting. And I found this degree that actually married the two, where I'm studying, like hard finance skills, but I'm also studying sort of more advanced economic thought and theory and how international policies and politics affect businesses. And that's the intersection that I'm most interested in right now. And I knew that, sure, I could go study it on my own, but working with professors who I'm still intimidated by, but am much better at talking to, working with those professors were going to give me a context outside of the one that I existed in that would help me do my job better. So I don't want to leave my job. I'm not looking to change industries necessarily. I just needed that extra boost. And I knew that the context would be really helpful. So, but I spent almost 6 years thinking about this and talking to a lot of people about whether or not I should go back to school. So it's, it did take me a long time to decide.
Teresa is intimidating, not me. So I'm just kidding. You should talk to me or Dr. Smart. We're all willing to talk to you, and we're not scary at all. And actually, maybe most of you have come to talk to one of us at some point or multiple times. How do you feel like your undergraduate sort of liberal education helped you sort of as a foundation for that graduate program? Because I think a lot of students who are studying civic and economic thought and leadership are going to think about, it's the kind of degree that makes you a well-educated human being and gives a student all the skills that you and Dr. Smart have talked about. But it's also not like you don't wake up one morning when you graduate and say, I'm So what do you think was the relationship between that undergraduate education, your working years, and the graduate degree, or selecting the graduate degree?
Yeah. I think the liberal arts education helped me really open my eyes to all of the different things that were happening in the world. And it helped me learn about what I wanted to experience before I decided to specialize. Because ultimately a graduate degree is a specialization. It's either an industry change or it's a specialization. And a lot of my friends when they got to the point in their career where they realized they didn't want to really do that career anymore, where I was when I was an assistant, I think they naturally thought, okay, well, now it's time to go to grad school. You know, you work for 2 years, then you go to grad school. You know, some of that was absolutely the right choice. I think for others, they felt like they went to grad school a little bit too early, and now they're specializing and they're trying to make it work for them. For me, understanding the landscape that I was interested in. So in my undergrad career, I also took bio classes. I took, you know, like art history. I knew that those were not the areas I wanted to study. I knew that I cared about politics, international relations. It helped me sort of find my lens through which to look at the world. And then as I was working, I realized that, you know, there were areas that I was interested in specializing in, but that I didn't really want to box myself in with an MBA or a law degree, right? So by working and learning about what lawyers do and what people with MBAs do, I learned that I didn't want either of those. And then when I finally got to my graduate program, the fact that I had this deep liberal arts background actually did help me understand not only like when faced with a big financial data set, how to start somewhere. Liberal arts education actually does help you do that just because you know how to problem solve, but it helped me articulate really complex issues that I was finding. So, you know, you can specialize and go on and sort of be that finance person. But for me, I don't want to be the CFO. I want to be the CEO. So I want to be able to know the right questions to ask of financial data. And I wanted to, you know, be able to communicate the decisions that I wanted to make. And so I wouldn't be able to do that with my liberal arts education, because right now I went back to school to learn a specific set of skills and to enhance the other sort of like, you know, policy side of things that I wanted to learn, but I wouldn't be able to communicate about those skills or communicate about those hard skills and what I was learning there if I didn't have that background. And to me, that was most important. And I should say that it's the same for, you know, a lot of our product team. Those are guys that know how to code and they're thinking about our website, but they have to think about how do we design a website that people who are reading our news actually want to look at all day, right? So they have to think about how people see news, how they consume things. They have to have a deep understanding in, you know, like how people think. And the only way to really do that is if you study ideas and philosophies and what people are actually interpreting when they look at things. And so even for some of our product guys, you know, we have a number of folks who have liberal arts degrees and then went to a coding boot camp because they realized that's what they really love. And now they're using that in the context of our company. And that's really useful. So I think it's good to learn hard skills. Absolutely. But when you have the opportunity to just study ideas and to write papers and to explore different, you know, sides of an argument and to argue with your intimidating professors, you should absolutely spend that time doing that, because hard skills are something you can learn later on, and they're always evolving. You'll always have to relearn them.
Go ahead. John, go for it.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us. I really appreciate it. Definitely almost kind of nice that it got postponed into the COVID world for us to rethink it at this time. Very relevant. I appreciate your discussion of like saying you weren't sure about going to grad school immediately and kind of wanting experience in the business world. Could you talk on, and like I guess this aligns with hard skills as well, whether it's coding boot camps or entering the private sector to grow skills, or maybe even it gets to the point of like, you know, just going to live abroad. Like what examples of those experiences do you recommend in like growing these hard skills, or things that, you know, as you kind of said, they're always evolving?
Sure. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, like what examples do I have of learning hard skills, and how did it, you know, so how did it work for me?
Yeah, and I suppose that'd be like you're going into the private sector, and kind of like if you could unpack that. So
Sure. So the one thing I'll say about education with hard skills is that now that I'm in grad school and I'm learning like hard finance skills, it's super, super helpful to have the context of the professor there to explain like why this matters in the world. But for a lot of hard skills, if you need them, you can learn them now online. There are a lot of different ways, especially now that we're all in COVID and everything is online. There are a lot of different ways to learn hard skills. So when I was thinking about entering the private sector, and I was specifically, trying to market myself to my boss as like, hire me as your assistant, otherwise I'm not going to have a job in 3 months and I don't know what I'm going to do. And also I wanted to work at DevX. The ability to know how to learn things was something that made me an attractive candidate to DevX. So when you learn your liberal arts degree, you're learning a lot about yourself and how you process information and how you learn different things, right? So you're all going to take tests and exams, and you're going to learn how you learn, basically. And if you're only learning one skill, you only learn how you learn that one skill. If you have to think through a lot of different ideas and perspectives, you're going to understand how to learn a lot of different skills. And so in entering the private sector, I knew with a lot of confidence that if I didn't know the answer, I could definitely figure it out. I knew how to research things. I knew, what sort of angles I could look at to be really competent. And I knew that if there was a hard skill that I needed to learn, and there were a lot of hard skills I needed to learn, things like, technologies like Salesforce, which is a technology a lot of businesses use. I knew that I could figure out how to learn that. And I think that that's really most important. And it was the same when I studied abroad in Jordan, right? Like I spoke 2 years of Arabic before I dropped myself in the middle of this country and had to figure out what to do. But I knew I could figure out what to do. And I knew I could figure out, how to navigate the city, because I had already spent a lot of time thinking through different, problems. And it really is thinking through the problems. I don't necessarily think you have to be an expert Arabic speaker, obviously, to go study abroad. I think it's just the ability to be able to figure things out that's most important. And that's what nobody expects you to show up to your first job interview and like know all of the possible hard skills. In fact, you sort of look ridiculous if you come in and say, I know everything about this company and I can absolutely do everything that you like. Then what's the point of hiring you? You're not going to learn anything. Like, this doesn't make any sense. I think what's far more important is the ability to be able to say, like, I know that I can learn things that I don't understand right now. And I know that if you need me to code a website, I can easily figure that out. And you absolutely can if you have a background in problem solving. Does that answer your question?
Very much so. Thank you.
Salem.
Hi, I had another question. So I guess what advice would you have for us to maximize like a class, a liberal arts class, for example, in SCETL? Like if you're taking multiple discussion-based, writing-based classes, it seems like for me at least, it seems like I can't absorb everything at that moment. So I guess, yeah, any advice for like maximizing those type of classes?
One thing I wish I had done in undergrad was I wish I had spent some time with all of my professors in office hours, just getting to know them, because I think that helps you maximize the class. And it seems like such a nerdy thing to do. Again, back to the intimidating thing. And I'm not just saying that because you have 2 professors here. I really do wish that I had gone to office hours and talked to them a little bit about why they were interested in it, because there were some classes that I learned where I felt the same way. It's like, I'm barely getting through writing this paper and I've got a million other things going on. The ones where I understood why the professor was interested in it and why they thought it was cool really helped me stay engaged in the topic and think about, like, do I agree with this professor? Is this the coolest thing ever? Or are they just total nerds in this subject, right? And you learn a little bit more about what you think is interesting and what you disagree with. And I think that that's something to think about too, is often when you're sitting in class and you're hearing from a professor, it kind of feels like, like this is what you're learning right now, right? But I think it's important to listen to yourself and say, like, if you disagree with something, like, why do you disagree with it? Is your background? Is it because of something else that you read? Is it something else that someone said? And to really engage with yourself on that, especially now in business. when someone says something and I disagree with it, because I disagreed a lot in college, I really trust myself and I know how to ask questions that kind of get to an answer that I will be satisfied with when I disagree with something. And I think that that's really important. And I think you'll get more out of the classes if you think about that. I would also always ask about other perspectives on the topics that you're learning about. Like, are there other perspectives I should be thinking about or we should be thinking about? Because that's super useful in any job that you ever go to. You're gonna have to work with other humans, and other humans have other perspectives. And the more you can start to learn about that or learn how to figure that out, the better off you'll be.
Thank you. Now we have 2 questions and 4 minutes left. So brief questions, brief answers, and we'll start with Jacob.
Yeah, so right now, or this past semester, I've been interning for a congressional office, and it's been a good experience, but I think I've realized I don't want to work that close to politics. So as I start looking for like a new internship, like what are the things that you look for most in an employer?
Yeah, so that's why at the end of my presentation, I said to look at the job descriptions, because I think like I did the same thing. I worked for senators, I worked for congressional offices, and I realized that that's actually not, it sounds like sexy and cool, but the day-to-day is like actually not what I want to be doing. So I always think about who is the actual person that I'll be working for, right? So 50% of the reason that I took the job at DevX is because Raj is an incredible person and I really respected him and I admired him and I believed in what he was doing. I actually had another job that I was considering at the time that paid a lot more money, but I chose DevX because I really believed in the guy running it. So I would always look at who you're working for and do you believe in them? I would also just really read job descriptions carefully and think about, what do I enjoy doing right now in my life? Like, do you enjoy reading? Do you enjoy writing, talking to your friends, watching TV? Like, what are the things that you enjoy? And map that out on top of a job description. Are there things in there that you know you're going to enjoy doing? Or does it kind of sound like a miserable 9-to-5 job? And there are definitely internships that people take for prestige, and that's awesome. And that's useful too. But when you're thinking about a job, you're spending 40 hours a week doing that thing. So it's really important to think about, what skills do you like and feel good doing? And are you going to be getting to do those 9-to-5? If you are, that's a great job.
Thank you. All right, last question from Addie.
Hi. Okay, so speaking of jobs, a lot of interactions that people are having right now are digital. What is your advice for making an impression digitally with interviews, following up, just in the world of COVID? And it's a lot easier to make a first impression when you're in front of someone. So what's your advice about the digital world we're living in terms of interviews? And yeah.
Such a good question. There's a lot of like really practical advice, like have really good lighting. If you guys could see my setup right now, there's actually a lamp without a lampshade, like giving me good lighting. And that's how I do this. I don't have a ring light. So, but it's really important just to be well lit, because it shows that you're thinking through the other person's experience. I also think kind of embracing yourself and finding ways to break the ice by either, like commenting, oh, I like your background, things like that. I think that's really important. Things like looking at the camera, making an effort to nod your head and be very expressive, like, use your hands. It just makes it feel a little bit more human. But I think the same advice still applies. Write your cover letter really well so that it makes people know that you've done your research and that you've looked through the job description. Be early to your meetings. Say, how are you? How are things going? Like act like a human being when you're talking to people. Always send thank you notes. I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed who don't do that. And the people who do that really stick out. It's not something that everybody does. It's not something that everybody remembers. Handwritten thank you notes, especially when we're all virtual, are impressive if you can do that. And you can just straight up email someone and say, I'd like to send you a handwritten thank you note. Do you mind giving me the best address for you? They might not do it, but that is something that you can totally do. And even if they're like, actually, like my mail is weird and I don't want to give you my home address, you've at least made that effort and they know that you care about doing that. And that's an impressive thing that people remember. But I mostly think that presentation is still everything. Like, dress like it's a job interview, make sure that you're engaged, make sure that you're nodding your head. And, if you're writing things down or looking at your second screen, say that. These human cues are more important. And give yourself a break if they're exhausting, because interviewing is exhausting no matter what, even if it's in person, and it is super exhausting over Zoom. So it's okay to take a nap afterwards.
Well, thank you very much, Meg. And I think that you've earned a nap, because presenting and being grilled with a Q&A session is also exhausting. So we are so grateful that you're here. And students, I just want to encourage you all, as the semester comes to an end, we professors are here for you. We want you to succeed. We know the SCETL advantage is real, but it's also up to you to take advantage of the opportunity. So stay engaged, challenge yourself in your courses, and keep your eyes peeled for future events in the series. I know next semester, among other things, we're planning a pre-law lecture for those of you who are very interested in going to law school, or who just want to find out more about it. So keep your eyes out for that. And there will be another panel that's about applying for prestigious academic fellowships like the Marshall and the Rhodes, for those interested in learning more about that route. So we'll keep you posted. In the meantime,
don't forget to tell them about movie night.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, can you, I forget what date that is. I know it's in January. Can you fill them in?
So on January 28th, we're going to have a movie night with students, and we're going to show In the Secret Garden Outside. We're going to show The Death of Stalin, and we've invited Professor Henry Thompson from the political science department to come and sort of situate it. It's a satire. I know it doesn't sound like it would be a funny movie, but it really is. And we are, and he's going to sort of situate you in the Politburo before the film, but it's really good. We can give you out treats. We're going to have, it has to be all individually packaged and so on, but I think it's really, we're going to try next semester as much as we can to figure out opportunities for us, some are going to be on Zoom, of course, but to try to find ways that we can safely get together in person as well, even if it's 6 feet apart and we're sort of shouting things to each other, not at, but to. So, and of course, look out for the Civic Discourse Project series on race, justice, and leadership, because we have some really great speakers for next semester as well. Thomas Chatterton Williams, Glenn Lowry. So please look those things up as well. And yeah, we're really, really happy that you could join us. I think that Meg gave you her email. A really good thing to do if I were a student on this webinar, it would be to follow up with Meg and say, thank you very much for joining us. That's the way that you make connections for the future.
Yeah, I put my email in the chat for everyone, and please, I am now officially on your board of directors. So please feel free to reach out and ask for advice. I'd be more than happy to chat further.
So thank you again. I'll let everybody go. Have a great evening, and I will expect to hear from all of you. Either reach out to me, reach out to Dr. Smart, reach out to both of us. We're all here for you. Thanks much. Thanks, Meg. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Of course. Take care, everyone.
Bye.